Hello, screenwriters, and welcome to Writing for Screens. Today's episode, I Have Thoughts When You Ain't Got Nothing. My name is Glenn Gers, and I am the Chief Operating Everything at Writing for Screens, a channel for writers, especially screenwriters of any type, to try and take some skills and tools and techniques and insights that I gathered in a 25-year career writing for TV and movies. On my way out of the business now, I want to leave behind what I had to teach myself so that those of you who are trying to teach yourselves might not have to reinvent the wheel. These are just things to think about, to try, to see if they work for you, because there is no right or wrong way. There is no formula. There is no plan. Every artist must make their own path. All I can do is show you some of the stuff I ran into and some of the stuff I figured out that helped me, and you should try it for yourself and see. If it helps you, great, use it. If it doesn't, great. Maybe that tells you what not to do, and try other things that are different than that. Figure out what works for you. Okay. So, in order to help you do that, this is a little screen grab of the channel, the main page of the channel. If you look down at the bottom, you'll see there are playlists. You see those? Here's a closer version. The first 3 playlists, as you scroll down, are Screenwriting Essentials, Screenwriting Tools, Skills, and Craft, and The Process, Being a Writer. This totals about 50 10-ish minute videos. They are each a little lesson on a little topic. The topic is always in the title and in the thumbnail, so you can just scroll through and say, oh, dramatic action, genre, character, dialogue. That seems like something I could learn about. You click on that, you watch the little 10-minute lesson. That is where I have really worked hard to put together as many ideas and tricks and insights that might help you. You got to try them to see if they work for you. When I am finished with those, I decided to start doing live streams. So every Wednesday at 1 p.m., if I can make it, Pacific Standard Time Zone. Please note, Pacific Standard Time Zone, 1 p.m. Wednesdays. I come on, I talk about a different topic for an hour every time. Today's topic is When You Ain't Got Nothing, or the freedom of failure, the freedom of being an outsider. I'm going to talk about some examples about that and some lessons that we can learn from them. Before I get into that, let me do some quick hellos, because we got a bunch of people here. Hello. Hello, Sonia. Hello, Atanu. Hello, Pelicans. Hello, Hasco, not the pirate. And Ming from Brazil. Hello, Michael. And Rusharaj, yes, this is truly live. You are live. Well, I'm more live than you, but we are all live together. This is really happening. I am so glad to see you. Thank you for being here. Okay, so let's get right to it, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes on the topic, and then we can talk about whatever you guys want. But first, we're going to talk about what I want, because it's my show. All right, so let us take a look here. Oh my goodness, I got stuff. All right, so let us talk about this topic, when you ain't got nothing. Now, that, for those of you who know Bob Dylan, is a quote from the song Like a Rolling Stone. When you ain't got nothing, you got nothing to lose. And that is the point of this topic. And I'll tell you how it came to me. I was watching recently a documentary about David Chase, the creator of the show The Sopranos, which arguably changed television and created the bold new world of cable and streaming that we currently are possibly at the end of. The point is that they were talking about the first, there's 2 sections to the documentary. The first one is about getting that first season going. And one of the things they talk about is the fact that at the time, HBO was not a respected or prestige channel. It was a loser. It was a backwater which showed movies and boxing and comedy specials. That was it. They had tried a couple of really interesting and total failure series, Larry Sanders and Oz. So this net, when people were being cast on it, there's all these interviews with the executives and the cast, and they're saying, like, seriously, when I got this part, I was like, oh, this is really nothing. This is going to be on the most losery, nobody watches it network. The point about that is that HBO knew it had nothing to lose. It, in fact, needed to define itself as something different because it was at the bottom of the pile. And that reminded me of all the stories I have heard over the decades of this phenomenon, which is not preached, as far as I can see, among the how to succeed, how to write, how to be a filmmaker, how to be an artist. Everyone is like, figure out how they're succeeding, figure out how everyone's succeeding and do that. That is not the story of almost every really great success that's ever been. So I wanted to talk about that concept for a couple of reasons. The first is because success is just not the goal. Honestly, the goal is to do the good work, and maybe it will succeed or maybe it won't. Let me do a couple quick hellos, and then we'll get into some more of this. Hello, Dominic from Poland. Very nice to talk to you. And Araba from Ghana. Hi, very nice to have you here. And Tina, who's also, there's a lot of first-time live people. I hope you stick around. It's going to be fun. Hello from India. Okay, so good to see you. Yes, I'm happy I'm back too, Nishaj. All right, so let's get into some of these stories. The first thing I want to talk about is this concept of the freedom of failure. But really, what I'm talking about is the freedom of the expectation of failure. The freedom comes when you think you have nothing to lose, that where the odds are no one's going to care what you are doing and you are just doing the best you can considering. That is the ultimate creative power position. I cannot tell you how many famous artists have talked about the fact that once they were in fact famous or successful or working in the big leagues of whatever it is, the pressure goes crazy. The amount of people pushing and advising becomes insane. So just in a practical sense, it is awfully nice to not have all that. But really what I'm talking about is more the freedom of being an outsider, which always, when you're an outsider, feels like a punishment, like a disaster, like a limit on your abilities. I urge you to recognize the immense gift that being an outsider, of having the expectation of failure, gives you. And when I talk about this, I want to make clear, this is not the key to success. There is no such thing as the key to success. And even more important, I'm going to tell you a bunch of stories about successes that came from the outside, that came from having nothing to lose. But I kind of hate those Cinderella stories. Those stories about how when you're a loser, that just means you're about to become the big winner. That's really a lie. That's not true. I'm going to be telling stories of how these artists won by being different. But for every story like that, there are 1,000 where people are left in obscurity and debt. There is no guarantee of failure, of success. There is no key to success. This is the key to not giving a fuck. Okay, to not get, and I apologize for my language, but it's important. To not caring, to not worrying about success. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about both the creators and the distributors do their best, most exciting, most groundbreaking work when they have nothing to lose, when they're already on the outside or the bottom, and they figure we might as well try something either different, let's just be different, or let's do what we really believe because we might as well. We're not going to win anyway. Let's at least do what we believe. And that is the magic. That is the key. Doing what you truly believe in the best you can, no matter how much of an outsider and a loser you might be. That is actually the most important thing to this entire concept. Going to do a couple quick hellos again because Maria's here. She made it after. That's great. I am so glad to see you, Maria. Thank you for coming. I hope all is well. Marcus, it is great to see you. Yes, that's a good point. Another song lyric, freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose, from Chris Christopherson, Bobby McGee, me and Bobby McGee, the fabulous country song. So yes, absolutely. Thank you, Haskell. I had forgotten about that one. Hello, Wolf. Rich parents are as close as you can get to the key to success. Having known a fair number of people with rich parents, I can tell you that is not true. It is the key, weirdly, and this is an interesting thought. I'm actually going to talk about this more later, I hope. The concept that rich or even important parents or family or where you come from will give you success is absolutely not true. It will give you entree. It will give you an advantage in getting in. But in fact, the real power of having rich parents would be to say, I don't have to worry about money. I can do what I want. And almost none of the people who have that do that. Almost all of them say, okay, I'm going to use this to try and win in the big game, get into the big game. And they don't take advantage of that incredible safety net that they have. That's the point of having any form of advantage, whatever your advantage is, wealth, position, entree. The advantage is that you don't have to do what is expected of you because you have a cushion for your nothing left to lose. Okay. Oh, thank you, Maria. Just lived us out there to the world of social media. It is difficult not to have anything to lose when it comes to your career and livelihood. Yes, that's actually another really good point, which I should talk about. One of the most important things to do in order to deal with this is something that I always talk about, which is don't gamble your career, your livelihood, your ability to pay your rent on a creative thing. The point should be figure out some way to live, to have a safety net of your own, whether that is a day job you don't care about, a spouse who's willing to put up with you, a family who doesn't mind you sticking around and living in the basement while you make your music or your film or whatever it is, or moving to a place which costs less, or saving up, doing a job for a year and then saving up to take a month or two off to do your thing. Whatever it is that is going to give you that nothing left to lose safety net, that the whole point of nothing to lose is you're going to be okay no matter what. It doesn't matter. This is really, really important. Going all in, gambling everything is not the same as having nothing to lose. In that case, you have everything to lose. That's exact opposite of what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is operating within your safe zone so that you have creatively nothing to lose. That's an interesting and important point. I'm glad you brought that up, Burgundy. You still need to do something. Yes, exactly. That is exactly the point. You need to do. Hello, Mr. Killjoy. So let's talk a little bit about some of these examples that I've got of this story, because the first one is there. I put a link down in the bottom. There's a lengthy article about a guy who wrote a Pulitzer Prize winning novel, which was truly broke all the rules of what you would expect a Pulitzer Prize winning novel to be. It was a comedy, a comic novel about this gay novelist having a horrible time in his life. Anyway, the point is that here, let me get this quote because it's really great. He never expected less. That's the name of the novel. To reach a wide audience because his previous 5 books hadn't. In other words, this guy was writing books. He had lost his publisher. He was doing various other jobs, and he wrote and he said, I thought no one was going to read it, which was very liberating. I put things in I thought no one would ever read, and it's a little shocking now. I do urge you to read that entire article in the New York Times if you can. His story is just great, and it really sounds fascinating. But what he says is, having written this book, thinking I was a promising novelist who has become a completely forgotten novelist. I'm going to write something that I believe in. Unexpectedly, he wins the Pulitzer Prize, sells lots of copies, becomes quite famous. He had already started a sequel to that novel. Now, and I'm just going to read this. Greer is aware that some in the literary world might view his decision to write a sequel as uninspired, worse, a crass money grab. My agent was like, you can't write a sequel to a Pulitzer Prize-winning novel. That's just not seemly, he said. Well, it isn't. It's weird. It was a one-off. It ends. I certainly didn't think there was more to do, but I really wanted to write about America, and it was a really good way to do it. That's the key. He said, I really wanted to do it this way. The idea was there, and he had written the first one with nothing to lose, and he continued that attitude. Now he had actually more of, in some ways you would think he had more to lose. That's the way the success thought goes. I need to do what will be properly regarded in the world of success. And that would be to write a different novel, certainly not a sequel. However, he really wanted to write this sequel, so he did it. And it seems to be doing well. The main thing about that is simply, this was a person who had 5 novels published. So it's not that he was gambling his nothing to lose does not mean gambling your safety and security. It means you just have an expectation of failure. The freedom of the expectation of failure. That's the key. I think this is going to fail, so I might as well do what I want. That is the key. When you look at in the history of music, rock and roll. When rock and roll started, it was in a small studio in Memphis, Tennessee, and there were other places around, mainly in the South, but also some in the North that were doing. These were not the big companies. This was not the big business. This was people who had no reason to think they were going to change the entire face of popular music. They were making music they thought was cool. They personally liked it. They personally felt it. This is also true of country music. This is true of jazz. This is true of punk. This is true of hip hop. All of these musical forms, the entire second half of the 20th century and all of the time that's since then, the truly exciting new work came from people who thought, I am a loser on the outside. No one cares what I do. I'm going to do something different. I'm going to do something personal. I'm going to do something that means something to me. And that is my message. That is my key. Likewise, just to bring in some other art forms, I'm doing, as some of you know, I'm writing a novel set among the abstract expressionist painters who changed modern art in general, and culture, truly. They in the 1930s, before they had figured out what they were going to do that was going to change the world, there was no market whatsoever for American modern art. None. It was not taken seriously. There was no hope. They were a small cluster of people, mainly in New York, who literally came to view each other as their main audience. In other words, it's like they're playing to the crowd. They were just having fun in their lofts and little studios and apartments around New York City in the 1930s. And they were experimenting and exploring because they had no hope of making, there was no possibility of making money off of it, of becoming famous. Fame and money in painting simply did not exist in American modern art. What they did have, though, was a personal, religious, emotional, committed belief in art and being an artist. That was what they were operating out of. They felt like they wanted to change the world with their art, but there was no path to success. They just literally said, maybe if I do this stuff that I believe in, it will get through to people, which it did. And I see your comments. I'm going to get to them, but I want to just continue these little stories. I've told this one before, but the Coen brothers, who had a very successful first indie film. Then they had a second, slightly larger and successful film. And then they got to make The Hudsucker Proxy, which was going to be their first big budget studio film. It's a comedy. I really like it. It was by far their biggest effort to date. It was an enormous failure. It was a disaster, and they said we were outcasts. They had no expectation of success after this. So they said, since we are in movie jail, since we are considered disasters, why don't we make something personal that we believe is good in the world that we came from, which was Minnesota? So they did Fargo. So the Hudsucker Proxy, which was supposed to be their big studio breakthrough, disaster. Having been outcasted by this failure, they said, screw it. Let's have no expectation of success and simply do something that we think is great. Fargo went on to break through at the Academy Awards, made them big and famous, and the rest of their career has had its ups and downs. But the important lesson there is doing what you think will succeed is not in any way a guarantee of success. Doing what you believe in or can do or feel like doing is, if not a key to success, a key to satisfaction and the possibility of glory, even if it is unknown. As famously, Citizen Kane, Raging Bull, and It's a Wonderful Life all were neglected upon their first release. It's not like you do something different and everyone says, oh my God, now we see it. Sometimes that doesn't work that way. But sometimes it does, as I was saying about The Sopranos. From the moment it happened, it was big. But what was important to remember was at the time, there was no expectation of success. The expectation was, can we get to do this at all? Likewise, Mad Men and Breaking Bad were both picked up by a network that was, at the time, not even a full network yet. It was AMC. All they did was show movies. And they were like, we should do series. So they had no identity. They had no prestige. They had no power. And they needed to stand out among the flow of the more powerful. And they said, why don't we do things that are different, that are things that only we can do? And they bet on unusual, daring, authentic voices. Mad Men, Breaking Bad, both made AMC a major network. At the time, they were so outside the power system that they literally had nothing to lose. Likewise, USA, which did Mr. Robot at about the same time and following that model. Also, let's just remember, like Star Wars and Iron Man, both literally changed the world. At the time that they were being created, were ridiculous bets. There was no reason to believe that Iron Man would do any better than the many, many Marvel movies and comic book movies that had been disastrous failures before them. And likewise, Star Wars. Both Star Wars and Iron Man were recognized as powerhouse successes by their studios once they were made, once they were underway. Star Wars, it was not like, oh, that's a little indie film. But when it was being written, when it was being created, when George Lucas was saying, I've got this idea, no one was saying, that's the path to success. That's the way to go. And likewise, Iron Man. There was no particular reason to believe that Iron Man was going to be any good. Once they saw that it was good, the studios got behind it and they made them big. But they did not come out of a belief that they were going to do well. They had an expectation of trying to break through a ceiling of failure. And let's just, before I go to the comments and questions, I want to talk a little bit more about in cinema history. Let's remember, film itself, the art of cinema, was at the time that it blew up a joke. It was a weird stunt, a technological trick, and no one had any sense that it was an art form at all. It was simply a novelty, a popular gimmick when silent film began. Likewise, after that, once the studios had built up and there was a Hollywood industrial complex, after World War II, the film industries in France, Japan, and Italy particularly, and the rest of the world, but particularly three nations that had been truly war-torn and had absolutely no resources. There were no movie stars. There were barely any equipment. And they developed their own art forms within that. Japanese, French, and Italian post-war film movements, Italian neorealism, the French New Wave, Japanese cinema in the post-war era, especially Kurosawa, of course, who started out with very realistic cop stories. All of these there was no expectation of impact. There was no expectation of success. There was going to be some, like, they would hopefully pay their bills. They would hopefully make some stuff that was cool. But in fact, they were working with every indication that they could not possibly succeed. And yet they were so good, so exciting, so new. So they were opening up new forms of film language, which had reverberations through the rest of film history. Likewise, the indie movement of the 1980s, before it became a corporate product, had the same attitude. Just two more items I want to talk about before I get done and summarize. The first is Raging Bull, because there's a great quote from Scorsese from one of the many books of interviews with him about Raging Bull. Because what had happened was Scorsese had come from outside. But at a moment when indie film was breaking through, and he was working his way through Hollywood once again, just like the Coen brothers, building his way up to the biggest production he had done so far, which was called New York, New York, which is an interesting film. It's got a lot of good in it, but it was a disaster. It was a monumental disaster, and physically disastrous to Scorsese's health, as was his drug addiction at the time. At that point, he said, and here's the quote, he decided to do Raging Bull because, like as with Fargo, it was something that was deeply personal to him. It had no expectation whatsoever of succeeding. He said, I put everything I knew and felt into that film. I thought it would be the end of my career. It was what I call a kamikaze way of making movies. Pour everything in, and then forget all about it and go find another way of life. And that is what I am talking about. Put everything in, see how it goes, be willing to lose. That's the point. And in fact, when Raging Bull came out, it was not a success. 10 years later, at the end of the decade, because it happened just at the beginning of the 80s, at the end of the decade, when film critics were looking at the films of the 80s, they said, oh man, Raging Bull was really good, and it went to the top of all the best films of the 80s list at the end of the 80s. During the 80s, it was considered a weird art film failure. So the point about this is, and the other thing I want to say here is that this is once again not always going to work out with one of the best films of the decade. It won't. Most of the time, it will not. Like I said, for every winner story, there are going to be thousands of people who try to make something as great as they can and hope that they will break through, and they don't. That's okay. That's my point. I am going to argue that that is still more worth doing than any by-the-book attempt to play by the rules. And perhaps the artist who most embodies this actually has a big test of it coming out in a week or two. Francis Ford Coppola is continually putting himself in the position of losing everything. And he's done it repeatedly. It's actually quite amazing to see someone who every time he gets some power or position, he gambles on a bigger swing. Some of which are Apocalypse Now, some of which are One from the Heart. Apocalypse Now, which if you have not seen, is a masterpiece. But what's really fascinating is the documentary that was made 10 or 15 years later called Hearts of Darkness, which was a compilation of interviews and clips from his wife was doing behind the scenes footage during the making of Apocalypse Now. And what you see there is that Coppola was deliberately putting himself in a position of risk. He was making himself an outsider at a point which he was inside, in which he was safe. And he said, I need to do something that is going to be so risky that I will not feel like an insider, that I will not feel I am playing it safe. This is somewhat insane, and I do not recommend it to anyone. But sometimes it comes out as Apocalypse Now. Shortly thereafter, he did the same thing with something called One from the Heart, in which he had not only decided to do something unusual and original, he did it but once again with his own money, and he built the technology in the studio. He put all of his money into that. The movie is not good. I just rewatched it. It's not that good. It's really not. It's definitely not a masterpiece. It's not a neglected masterpiece. It's a mess. It's an ambitious, interesting mess with some cool stuff in it, but it's not a great movie, and it was not going to win. And the catastrophic result of that was that he had to spend, I don't know, 10, 15 more years doing whatever job he could get in order to try and get himself out of debt because of that. That's what I advise you not to do. I do beg you to not get into debt. If you've got nothing to lose, that includes not losing your house, your rent, your money, your car. Don't lose that. Have nothing to lose. There's a double meaning to having nothing to lose. Okay, I'm going to just do a quick summary here. What is the lesson? The lesson that I have for you. And then I will get to your comments and we will do questions. The lesson is, this does not mean that you should not try to achieve something great. This does not mean resign yourself to being small time. What it means is find the greatness within your reality. If you are a small, neglected network, find the greatness by taking chances on a subject and an artist that has no reason to be successful except you see them being good. If you are an artist, say, what is it that I can do that's personal to me, that's authentic to me, that I think is great? Even if what's personal to you is fantasy and sci-fi, that's cool. But do what your personal vision of that is. The most important thing to remember is be authentic, original, and daring. Take some chances, not financial chances. Don't get yourself into debt, but take an emotional, a creative risk. Do something that you believe in all the way. And if what you believe in happens to be a commercial thing, cool. Do it all the way. Do it your way. Be authentic. Be original within whatever it is you are doing. Be daring. Be powerful. Take risks. Enjoy and take advantage of your outsiderness. when you are an outsider, when you are a failure, have fun with it. Do whatever the hell you want. The main thing is, if you do that and it fails, what if nobody sees it? What if there's 20 people, like the first 5 novels that this guy Greer wrote? At least you had fun and you did something real. You did something that you're glad you did. That is the key to being a great artist. Whether or not every great artist will be a successful artist, separate question. The question is, how can you be as great as you can? By doing what you believe in all the way and trying to find some way to sustain yourself and survive doing it, and hopefully doing it again and again, because there's not just one, there's over and over. So the main thing you want to do is do something that you're like, if nobody ever sees this, will I be glad I did it? That's the key. Okay, now I'm going to go back and look at some of these many, many, many comments. Okay, so let's see. Zundel, hello Zundel, says, I have been reading The Art of Dramatic Writing. I recommend it. I have not read that since 1975 or something, so I don't remember. I remember liking it a lot when I read it back then, and it was one of the few books on dramatic writing at the time. So yeah, I would say it's by a guy named Egri, E-G-R-I. The Art of Dramatic Writing certainly was a good book. Greer's attitude has a lot in common with your other sermons about the need for writing from experience and need. Yes, exactly. That's why I liked it. And that whole article that's linked below. It's just good. It's just fun. Gus says, just learn the rules in order to break them all. Yes, I would say that is a useful thing. It is to your advantage to have the vast tool set of every rule possible and to know what the system is looking for, and then you can play within that and make your choices within that. Absolutely real film. Robert Kolb says, what's my favorite crime film? This is a toughie because, and it's not about crime films, it's about anything. My favorite anything is a really hard thing because, first of all, it changes, and second of all, it's just a pile. Like to say this one more than that one, nah. There are so many great crime films. Also, crime film is The Godfather a crime film? I would say it is. It's also a gangster film, a mafia film. There's like subdivisions. Obviously, the Godfather trilogy, especially 1 and 2, magnificent. There's actually a very little indie. Well, it wasn't an indie. It was fairly indie. It was one of Gandolfini's last films. Speaking of The Sopranos, it's called The Drop with Tom Hardy and James Gandolfini. Lovely little crime film. But there are so many crime films that are so good. Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3 is fabulous. There's just so many. Double Indemnity and Sunset Boulevard in many ways is a crime film. It's just so hard to say. There's so many. The Lady Killers is really good. It's a British crime film. Anyway, the point is, there's too many to list. I will continue to think of them during the course of this time, and I will drop as many as I can. Grounded in something they know and are intimate with. Yes, the Coen brothers, exactly. Yes, when they did Fargo, they were those characters were people that they had seen and grown up with, and that is pretty damn cool. Michael says many small films don't expect much, but it does find a small following, suddenly becomes a cult classic. Yes, exactly. And this is the tricky thing. Sometimes it doesn't become a cult classic, but it's still good. And that's the best you can do sometimes. There's no way to know if you're going to become a cult classic. But at the same time, you got to try. You got to do the best you can with what you have. Night and the City is a great old noir called Night and the City that I really love. Crime films. So many. Okay. It's a Wonderful Life is a staple in every holiday season I have seen since I was like 6 years old. Yes, It's a Wonderful Life is now a staple. The reason, when it came out, it was not a big hit. It was, in fact, I believe something of a forgotten film until there was, for some reason, I don't know exactly why, there was a copyright issue which allowed anyone who wanted it, any TV station, to broadcast it. And the reason it became a TV holiday staple was because they didn't have to pay for it. It was free for them. For some reason, for a while, It's a Wonderful Life was not copyrighted, or was available to multiple stations. So every single indie local station would run it, especially at the holidays, often multiple times, because it was free. As a result, people saw it who never would have seen it otherwise and recognized the greatness. That's the key. There has to be something within it that is good. There has to be something in it. And by good, I don't mean one particular quality or another. Sometimes things are good because they connect with the moment. They connect with a group. They connect with a voice. And they could be a mess, but they still connect. So anyway, It's a Wonderful Life connected because it's truly great. But it didn't have access to an audience until every local television station started to run it over and over again. And people were like, damn, that's good. And then it became a classic. Okay. Hi, Donna and Matthew. George Lucas is indeed Maria's hero in filmmaking. And if you look at George Lucas's career, he continues to do the same thing, which is to say, I want to have nothing to lose. He's odd in that way because it doesn't look like he has nothing to lose, but in fact, he continually does take those risks. He took those risks with the first Star Wars. He took it with American Graffiti. And then he followed it up by independently producing the prequel trilogy. He paid for that himself so that he could do what he wanted creatively. Burgundy says the opposite is true as well. Some movie makers badly but sincerely made the movies they wanted and unexpectedly found success in an iconic way. When they try to make their next movie worse, it fails. Yes. Yeah. The complexities of trying to game the success system is exactly why I urge you to not do that. It is fascinating what happened. I mean, let's remember when Coppola took on The Godfather, it was a very, very popular novel, but the movie industry considered it a low priority genre piece that they hoped would just be another formulaic gangster movie. He's the one who said, I see something else in it. And that was a battle. But it's not like anyone was saying, oh, The Godfather, even though it was a bestseller, oh, this is a surefire classic film. Okay. Lucas did indeed bank on himself, as many people do. By the way, you don't have to bank on yourself. The whole point about stories about like Mr. Robot and The Sopranos is sometimes you find a banker, a distributor, a place that takes art, and they are in need of a new voice because they are outsiders. In other words, if you go to the top of the heap, if you go to the biggest names, the big networks, the big studios, first of all, you are probably going to be, and this happens a lot, even among the big time, there's only one or two slots at the top and everyone else gets neglected. So it's very weird to be a failure within the big time, but it does happen that a project will become neglected because there's a bigger studio movie at that studio and all the resources go to it. And you get dumped on a bad date or with bad marketing or whatever else it is. This actually happens a lot. It's like, oh, woe is me, but still it is a problem for people playing in that arena. So the answer is that you don't have to do it all yourself. What you want to look for is someone who is equally hungry and recognizes the worth of what you are doing, or is willing to take a chance on what you are doing, even if it's not to their taste, which does also happen. That's cool. Okay. George Lucas was allegedly told nobody wants a fairy tale with princesses in space. Yes, there's absolutely no question that at the time he was working on Star Wars, nobody was saying this is going to be great until they saw the movie. I weirdly, when I was just getting out of college, I was applying for jobs in the film industry. I met, there was a friend of a friend of a friend of the family who worked at Fox in the marketing department. And I went to see him to see if I could get a job. And he said, no, not really. He said, but here, let me give you some posters on the way out. He said, here. And he gave me a Star Wars poster. It was just a black poster with the Star Wars logo on it. And he said, I will not forget this. He said, we think this movie that's coming out that we think is going to be very big. So Fox marketing, by the time they were ready to release it, knew that it was going to be very big. Nothing in the pre-production and production of it was indicating that it was going to be very big. But let's not kid ourselves. Once the corporations see the hit, when they see what The Godfather is, when they see what Star Wars is, they do everything they can to hype it and make it bigger. And that is what makes something a success. No matter how great something is, if it's distributed in such a way that nobody sees it or hears of it, or it's not eligible for awards or things, that will make it impossible for it to be successful in that sense. And that's okay. Sometimes you have to just do that and say, at least someone will see what I did. Okay. Yes, exactly. American Graffiti famously was somewhat, the studio was not behind it until it blew up. Cassavetes got together with friends and shot 16 millimeter feature. Yes, Cassavetes repeatedly, like Coppola, would say, in order to do this thing that I want to do, which is not mainstream acceptable, I have to work my other jobs. Cassavetes would take acting jobs, build up his money, and then he would shoot in his house with his friends, with people he knew in the business who had cameras, etc., etc. Haskell says, off topic, what do Star Wars and Apocalypse Now have in common? Answer, there's more than that. Harrison Ford, that never ceases to puzzle me. Well, not really. I mean, if you think about it, Harrison Ford was cast originally in American Graffiti. Coppola produced American Graffiti. And so therefore, both Coppola and Lucas knew about Harrison Ford. And in fact, Coppola put Harrison Ford in The Conversation in a small part before his small part in Apocalypse Now. What Apocalypse Now and Star Wars have in common more than that is that George Lucas wrote the original script for Apocalypse Now and was planning to direct it himself. Watch this documentary, Hearts of Darkness, to see this whole amazing story. But in fact, George Lucas wrote Apocalypse Now, intending to direct it. Coppola was going to produce it in his new studio. After various steps, Coppola took it over. Ford was also in Paranoia. Harrison Ford has done a lot of movies, and is actually very good in this new sitcom on Apple called Shrinking. Okay, light and forms, but isn't sharing what you create with others the other side of the creative coin? How can you direct your creative energy towards something and not be concerned about getting a bunch of eyes on it? Great question. Great question. Here's my answer. You do want a bunch of eyes on it. You don't need the biggest number of eyes. This channel is a fairly good example of that. There are screenwriting channels with much larger view counts and subscriber counts. There are things I could do to make this more likely to get those hits. It would, however, damage the content of what I am doing, the vision, if you will. So I am choosing to do this the way I can and want to do it, in a way that I have nothing to lose, so that I can, if everyone stops watching, I'll still feel glad I did it. If somebody else is getting 1 million views, I mean, I get a couple hundred on these live streams, a couple hundred. It's not great. There's no advertisers jumping up and saying, hey, we want to pay you to do this. I'm doing it out of my office in such a way that I can afford to. So the answer is yes, it is important to get someone to see it. But right now we are living in a time when that is more doable than it has ever been. You can distribute things online, and you can get, sometimes it's just a few hundred. If you do a play, if you do any number of artistic endeavors, you are likely to just get a handful of people to see it. The question is, when they see it, how do they react? And that has got to be, to me, the way that you operate when you are trying to have the expectation of failure. If you say, if I get 60 views on this movie, that's cool. Like, recognize it is not unusual to have an extraordinarily limited number of people see something. Plan for that. That's not nothing. That's an audience. If you were doing a little play in a little theater in some city, that's how many people might see it. And that's good enough. That's a good, the idea that you keep doing that and that maybe someone will love it and talk about it and pass it on and something will happen, maybe. But if not, have that expectation of failure and say, the question is, how do you direct your creative energy towards something and not be concerned about getting a bunch of eyes on it? Just consider the value of the size of the bunch. There are only a few things, especially right now. We are in a time when certain algorithms and certain companies are sucking up all the eyes, and therefore there's a long tail, if you will, a small number of people who can be reached with other things, and that has to be your marker of success. If you can get it on, and then if those responses to it are positive. One of the reasons I keep doing these live streams and this channel is because the responses, while not a lot, are great. That I keep getting messages from people saying, this helps me. I like this. It encourages me. And that's the point of what I'm doing. The goal, you have to set in mind a goal. If you write something funny and you get 12 people who comment, this is funny, I laughed my ass off, then you have won. If you didn't think, I need 1 million views, because what gets 1 million views is a very complex and not entirely within your control thing. So if you're only, this is what I'm trying to say, if you're only setting yourself this insider winning goal, you are unlikely, first of all, to do good work, because the things that are required of something that will make that kind of impact, the number of compromises, the number of collaborations, the number of changing your vision is very large. And yes, you will then get, famously, the people who get a lot of views on YouTube, they spend a lot of time doing testing and steering towards what gets views. I don't believe that most good art comes from steering towards what gets views, ticket sales, anything else. My personal opinion. Certainly, there is an argument for the other, for doing everything you can to test and steer towards what you believe will do well. All I can say is look at the number of things that fail when they do that, and then they have nothing. Because if all you're doing is trying to get views, if all you're doing is trying to get a contract with a big company, if all you're trying to do is win that weekend, the odds remain small that you will. And if you fail, you will have nothing, because all you were trying to do was that. If you say, I am trying to get this particular story told, I am trying to have this kind of character be a hero, I'm trying to take down this kind of character, whatever it is, you can do that. And whether or not it gets 1 million views matters a whole lot less. Okay. Arkmish. Hello, Arkmish. Does a movie need to have a core conflict or central conflict that remains the same throughout the movie and gets resolved in the climax? Or kind of, I personally do not believe that you can have multiple. Not that you can't. There are stories that do that. They tend to be hard to follow. And there's an argument for artistically, if you have some very powerful beliefs that there's a thing that will be reached by the audience because of the difference. But in fact, usually there's a relationship between the two conflicts. One causes the other. So therefore, they are kind of one. One is a response to the other. Whatever it is. I did another live stream on the topic of what if your main character's goal changes. I will put a link to that down in the description about 10 minutes after this is done, which will be very shortly. So no more questions, please. So look for that. And I talk more about the question of whether or not you can tell, essentially it's telling multiple stories within one work. You can do that. But usually they are prioritized in some way where one is more important than the other, or one causes the other. In some way or other, there's usually one that is more central than the others. I hope that helps. Yes, Lehane, I believe, actually wrote the novel after coming up with the idea for the script. It's a terrific little book too. Maria says, what is so amazing is that he created Skywalker sound and Industrial Light and Magic. Yes. One of the things that George Lucas did was he had creative urges outside of just making movies. Those creative urges included creating this empire, which is very creative. There's no question that is also creative. Thank you. Yes, you can do it yourself. It might take years of rejection, but you can put something out on YouTube that can catch on fire. Yes, thank you. And Maria does her work. That's the main thing. Okay. Threat of Nemesis says, don't underestimate a cult following. That is true. That's what I'm aiming for. Rather than have a group of engaged fans than a bunch of, I would rather have a group of engaged fans than a bunch of randos. Yes, there is an internet theory about having 1,000 true fans, but yes, there are some things which become cult hits without ever making it big. Rocky Horror Picture Show became legendary without ever becoming actually popular. Yes. Do not underestimate the value of a cult following, of a small following, of a community, which may just be your hometown, or it may be your community online, where you do your work for that community. Remember what I said about the abstract expressionists. There were a lot of factors involved in the changing of the American financial and social system that allowed American abstract art to become famous. But for 10, 15 years before that, these artists' audience was each other. It was a small cluster of people in downtown Manhattan who were essentially going to each other's shows. That's what it was. And that is really, really legitimate, whether or not you then break through to Life magazine. When there is Hero with 1,000 Faces, and then there is Save the Cat, Telling to Write According to Beats, there is 22 Steps by John Truby, who to listen to? I can tell you. I can tell you the answer to this. There's an actual answer, which is in this video. I will put a link to it in the bottom. Hold on, I'm writing it down. Okay, so yeah. Screenwriting rules. Please look at this video. I talk in detail about this question, which is, my basic answer is none of these formulas is right. None of these systems of writing, of art is correct or will save you or will guarantee you anything. They won't. But each one will be full of, just like this show, tools, insights, ideas for you to think about, and you'll pick the ones that you can work with, that work well for you, and the ones that work for what you are trying to do. So the answer is no, none of them is the answer. All of them have some answers that you need to pull for yourself to make your own path, your own choices based on how you operate and what you want to do and what your talents are. It's always different. Everyone will have a different set. So what you want to do is read or study as many of those as you can tolerate. I have very low tolerance for it. But the answer is gather as much as you can, take what works for you, put the rest aside in your toolbox. You never know. Okay, no more questions or comments. Yes, exactly. Sonia knows. Thank you. The journey is what matters, not the end. Yes, to a great extent that's true, but I would also say the work is what matters, not the competition, not the winning of a competition amongst works. What matters is, can you do the work well, and can that well work to work reach even a small audience? And if that audience is small, beautiful. Try again, keep going. You never know. First of all, sometimes the building up of small audiences creates a momentum, and then something kicks in and something works. You never know what it's going to be, and you never know if it's going to be. What matters, though, is continuing to do it. I once again, I just urge you to find greatness within your reality. If all you can do is a web series, do a web series. If all you can do is write a script and put it online and see how it does in contests, do that. If all you can do is whatever it is, what's the best thing that you can do with that? If you can't do special effects, how can you create the things you want within that reality of your working situation? Be authentic and original and daring. Take risks. If you think, ooh, I really like that, but I don't know if that will succeed, do it. That's the point. I really like that. I see it. I get it. You may be wrong. Everyone may hate it. It may be one from the heart. It may be any number of things which just don't work. It's still worth doing. It is not worth putting yourself into debt and having to go bankrupt. It is worth doing within your reality. Work in such a way that you can continue to work and that you have the freedom of the expectation of failure, the freedom of being an outsider. Okay? Enjoy your outsiderness. That's my message. Last question, Mr. Killjoy. I start off with a lot of action, then lull into exposition. My protagonist shows up around page 16. Is that a problem? Not there is. First of all, there's no particular rule about any of this. Starting out with a lot of action and then having exposition is a pretty fair way to approach things. To say, okay, I'm going to get people in and then I will explain things. Cool. Page 16, who knows? Page 5, page 25, doesn't matter. None of that matters. There's no rule. Page 16 sounds like a completely reasonable place to slow down and talk. Sounds good. Have fun. If you have a conviction that it works, try it. When I started out, had a tendency to have the first act be about 50 pages. My introduction just took a long time to get everybody going. I had to learn that was just it was just not. It wasn't working. It was fun for me, but the beginning was always more fun than the end for everybody. So I was like, okay, I have to recognize that the thing that I am doing because it just feels right is actually not accomplishing what I would like as an audience. You need to think about what you can do creatively and then what you actually want to do as an audience for your own work. You're constantly going back and forth between those two. Okay, this is it. This is goodbye. I will see you next week. It has been delightful. I hope that you guys took something from it, and I hope that you go write something.